Alex Ryvchin joins me now. He's co-chief executive of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. Alex, we see another day dawn in the Middle East with a great deal of uncertainty over the region. And I noticed today you've launched a campaign for the return of hostages. It's called Set Them Free. There's a great deal of emotion right now among families and friends of those held hostage in Israel within our Australian Jewish community, isn't there?
There is, and we heard some of the testimony today from a woman whose niece and nephew, 6 of her family members, were taken captive. They've heard nothing from them. They can only imagine the horrors minute by minute that they're being subjected to. It's a really distressing situation, and it brings home the human component of this. I mean, some want to divert our attention from why we are where we are, why Israel is now launching its military operation, but I think it's really paramount to remember that there are still 199 Israeli and other nationalities being held captive by the sadists and barbarians that are Hamas, and 1,400 people slain. And this is what we're fighting. This is what the civilised world has to be unified in fighting.
A terrible conundrum for Israel as they weigh up their response with the knowledge that there are 200 hostages in Hamas captivity right now.
It's a dire situation, militarily and strategically, to know that there are 199 hostages there, to know that any operation to attempt to extract them is likely to be bloody, to know that sending Israeli troops, young men and women, into harm's way, into the booby-trapped alleys and tunnels that Hamas have created there will be extremely deadly. But this is the situation that they're in, and Israel is there to defend its citizens, and it will do what's necessary to do so. There's no hope of negotiating with Hamas. You can't negotiate, you can't reason with people that hack open the stomachs of pregnant women, that burn children alive, that rape women next to warm corpses. There's no negotiation with this. The only thing to do is to be determined, to have the support of allies, and to be resolved in destroying this menace once and for all.
You've criticised the Greens and some human rights groups for being silent after the atrocity in Israel and amid the kidnapping of those hostages. Do you believe that this is a blind spot simply for the treatment of Jewish people when it comes to the Greens?
Well, I think in times of crisis, things are revealed. You know what you have and what you lack. You know who's with you and who's against you. And these so-called human rights organisations and the Greens, the upholders of human rights, as they would claim to be in the federal parliament, have shown themselves to be hypocritical in their entirety, to have no concern for international law and human rights. They're extremely selective. They're wholly politicised and hollowed out. And the fact that they could stand by in silence after the massacres that we all saw, the atrocities against women and children and civilians that we all witnessed, the fact that they've said nothing about the return of 199 people in Gaza right now, it really says it all. And Amnesty took a massive blow to their credibility when they came out effectively against Ukraine, which is suffering immensely as well. And they try to walk these things back. They try to issue balancing statements, but I think their political agenda is absolutely clear. It's anti-Western, it's anti-Israel, and sometimes it borders on anti-Jewish as well.
2 ministers in the Albanese government, Ed Husic and Anne Ali, have said that the people of Gaza are being collectively punished for Hamas's barbarism. They've condemned the terrorist atrocity perpetrated by Hamas, but they say that now the Palestinians are being collectively punished. Are the comments of Ed Husic and Anne Ali reasonable in your view?
Well, look, I've had the pleasure of meeting both Ed and Anne, and I think that they are wholly decent people, and they are looking at the scenes of devastation on both sides at the moment, and they're hurting from it, and I can understand that. But again, I think it's important to understand why we are where we are. And no one wants to see war. No one revels in war, except, of course, groups like Hamas that thrive on this sort of conflict. but it's essential for the long-term peace of the region, of both Israelis and Palestinians, to liberate the Palestinians in Gaza from the rule of Hamas. There can never be peace. There can never be peace. There can never be accommodation. There can never be normal civil existence when you have this barbaric terrorist organization embedded on Israel's borders. And the greatest beneficiaries of their destruction will be the Palestinian people. So we all are hurting right now, seeing this war unfolding and seeing the horrors the war brings. But in the long term, it's absolutely essential, I believe, to be resolute, to be determined, and to defeat this terrorist force once and for all.
The Labor backbencher Maria Van Vakenu said that she calls on the international community, the Australian government, to call for an end, to call on Israel to halt its invasion of Gaza. It follows the calls by the Greens to stop the invasion of Gaza. Do you see those comments in a similar light to those by the ministers?
Well, I haven't had the personal dealings with Ms. Van Vakenu, but I'm sure, again, she is primarily concerned for civilian life and for human rights. She, at least in that press conference, had the decency and the integrity to call out Hamas a terrorist organisation, which is not a difficult thing to do after what we've witnessed. But not everyone is able to do that in the pro-Palestinian movement. Few are, in fact. But look, putting that aside, I think it's important, again, when we talk about human rights, when we talk about civilian life, if we really care about these things, we should be campaigning as one people together for the return of those hostages and the total disarmament and destruction of Hamas. That is the only way that we can achieve peace for Israelis and Palestinians in the future. There's no other way.
The risk, I guess, expressed by Joe Biden, from Joe Biden all the way down, among those that have been urging caution, has been the fear that this erupts, Alex, into a region-wide conflict, that it's not limited just to Israel and Gaza, that it could explode even further. I guess that's the other thing that they're grappling with right now in Tel Aviv.
Well, Kieran, the eruption has occurred. The eruption occurred on October 7th, when thousands of jihadists entered into Israel and slaughtered 1,400 people in their homes. That was the eruption. And for all the bellicose statements coming from Arab nations and leaders and people around the world, I think the Arab world knows what is happening. They know what Hamas is. The Egyptians know this well. The Jordanians know it well. Israel's new allies through the Abraham Accords know this well. They have seen this barbarism in their own streets, and they don't want this. They don't want the region inflamed in any way whatsoever. They want a restoration of peace and stability and prosperity. And I believe the Arab world knows better than anyone the need to confront and combat extremism. That's what was done with ISIS, that's what was done with Al-Qaeda, and that's what has to be done with Hamas.
Alex Ryvchin from the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, I appreciate your time again today, and we'll stay in touch over the coming weeks.
Thank you, Kieran.